What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. First, just go follow me if you haven't at Kojak Podcast, and that's COJAC Podcast. That's all I need to do. So tonight's show, we've been trying to schedule this forever, and I am so excited. This guy, I have seen his post. I obviously follow him on Twitter, and I was just telling him before the show, I respect anybody that researches themselves, that creates their own content. And this guy has such an amazing ancient history knowledge that blows like probably 99.9% of the, I mean, I don't know. I can't like name a better one. So I'm really excited. So Andy from the Deep Share podcast. What's going on, dude? Thanks for coming.
Jack Allen, I am humbled. That was quite an introduction, man. And I don't know if I would agree with that, but I mean,
no, dude.
I am obsessed and interested for sure.
Well, so and I wanted, like I just wanted to, because you like your knowledge is it's seriously impressive. So when did you start like reading, researching all this stuff?
So it started for me when I was like 18 years old, back in 2002, 2003.
Okay.
I started doing lots of psychedelic drugs, and it blew my mind right open because before that, I was just like this pot smoking metalhead who was an atheist, and all the atheist scientists were starting to rise to the top of the pop culture charts. It was very weird. They were like the new rock stars, the Sam Harrises, Neil deGrasse Tyson, all the Richard Dawkins, all these guys were gaining so much popularity with me and a number of other people in that, I don't know, that group of mine, I guess. And so I was like a little atheist running around thinking I knew everything. And then I did psychedelics, and that fell apart immediately, and I didn't know what to think anymore. And so I just dove in head first into just research, because I couldn't really talk to any of my friends about it because it didn't really blow their minds the way it blew my mind. Or, I mean, it didn't do what it did to them that it did to me anyway. Right. So I ended up just reading a lot of dead people in libraries and bookstores, sitting there for hours, never buying anything, that kind of guy. Good. So yeah, it started with like consciousness, and which led into like quantum physics, and inevitably all these things circled around our history. And my dad was a big history buff. He loved history, still loves history, just not my style usually. But so it all started to go back further and further because I just wanted to know where it all came from. Where did this start? Like specifically it started with psychedelics. Like, okay, society hates it. You know, at the time, this is how I looked at everything as this young person, that this was shunned by society. It was evil. The government hated it. But then, of course, I learned a little differently later on. But, you know, so I wanted to go back in time to see when this was natural. When did this first start? And of course, that's been a mystery this whole time, and it's still a debate to this day. But from there, I just launched into a number of different categories in my research. And one of the best things that psychedelics ever did for me was really gave me this hypersensitivity to being careful with my discernment and what I'm believing, because psychedelics showed me that every thought or belief I had was illusory or misperceived. You know, it wasn't necessarily a lie that I was thinking about, but I wasn't seeing things the right way. And most people have that experience. And I started to analyze history that way. And man, now flash forward 20 years, I met up with a few key awesome people early in this podcasting game. Most noteworthy would be my friend Dan, who introduced me to what is known as the Lemonkinen mythology, or the Box Saga, which just ripped my world apart all over again. And yeah, man, I've just been looking into straight human history ever since, and it's more fascinating than most of the mystical stuff that kind of takes us away from the ground rather than keeping our 2 feet there.
Interesting, dude. No. And so, I mean, it's like you planned it, that this is a perfect, so that you were, I still remember, I don't remember what you said in the tweet, but I saw you were either talking to some guy like involved with the Box Saga, Bock, right?
Yeah,
Block?
B-O-C-K. Bock
Okay,
Saga.
Bock.
Yeah.
So I was like, what? I have never heard of this. And like I read real briefly, it seemed like a treasure type of, or like it's hidden stuff. So could you tell people, because I now beyond that I know nothing else about it. So
Could
you it's all you. It's all you.
It's basically an entirely alternative story to history, but it doesn't necessarily get in the way of any of the alternative or even established history that we know of. It just kind of adds more to it. And of course, there's no physical proof or anything yet, other than what they claim is symbolism that actually comes from the Box Saga rather than, say, Babylon or Egypt or something like that. So there's no actual proof that we know for a fact that this is true. But the Box Saga, what it does for me is it fills in a lot of holes, and it definitely inspires for sure. So the Box Saga starts with basically one people all over the world, and we're all black, all of us in this early time, this very beginning time, this paradise time. Everyone's black, and the earth is not tilted on its axis. It is straight up and down. We're also talking about a globe earth here, technically, in the cosmology. I have heard people talk about the Box Saga in terms of a flat earth. I haven't really gone down that path with it.
Okay.
Just because it keeps it simple. They also talk about the ball and lance, and it's all phonetic. We're going to hear a lot of phonetics in here, but the earth being right perpendicular with, or straight up and down on its axis, the axis being this lance and the ball being the ball. So ball, lance, that's what they say. Anyway, eventually this cataclysm happens, and this paradise time basically ends. And what once was this united nation all over the world, all having these concentric ring cities like Atlantis all over the globe, was now completely cut off from the northern hemisphere, which was completely encased in ice. So we're talking about an ice age, basically. And as the story goes, the Gulf Stream that comes up through Mexico and the coast, and goes all the way up to the Gulf of Finland, basically created a cyclical pattern up there and couldn't get through the ice because it was kilometers high, and it kept that whole area warm. And so they basically, this was their home, the people from this Box Saga story, that they ended up in this place in the ice, cut off from all the other tribes and cultures that were technically all connected to them with the same rituals and the same symbolism and all of that, supposedly. And when they get cut off, I mean, I'm going a little fast here, so tell me to slow down. There's a lot there's a lot of things in between, and little details I'm going to have to cover back on. But basically, when they are cut off in the ice, they claim that this time period was called Altlandis, all land ice. And this is supposedly where we get originally this term Atlantis. This is what turned me on to the Box Saga the most, because when we look at even the most wild, most of them anyway, most of the alternative theories on Atlantis, or just any theories on Atlantis, for the most part, we just simply run into people following the narrative laid out in Plato. We have the Critias and the Timaeus, like those accounts from the priest in Egypt and all that. So that's the only account we have of Atlantis. So we're looking for one capital city that's made of concentric rings, right? So technically, we have no reason to ever look for any more. We have no reason to connect like the idea of like multiple ring cities all over the place. We just have debates on where Atlantis was. We never think of it as anything but this mega city or mega capital, instead of what is basically pretty evident when you look at the anthropological data, that these were seafaring people that were everywhere. And so it's not necessarily like a singular place. And even more so is that like the aspect of the Box Saga, if true, it's so obviously been hidden by academia that you would never be looking for something like a time period known as all the land ice. You're strictly looking for a place, a location called Atlantis.
Mhm.
So it's already kind of convoluted.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit for you. If you
Yeah,
have
no,
anything,
and so do you kind of tie like does the was Atlantis like this? Is it like a similar to a Tartaria theory?
you mean like the Atlantis stuff that's like traditionally talked about, or like this
I I
version?
guess this version, yeah.
Yeah, Tartaria to me sounds like people destroying their own evidence of their own crimes. That's what Tartaria seems like to me. And I think all of history is that. And actually, I think that's what we're going to talk about tonight a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
because I'm finding now more than ever that, and I think the Box Saga helped me with this in a lot of ways. What I'm finding from multiple different angles is that this lost civilization, or these, these beings of light, these helpers, these gods, all these different stories we have all around the world, they're all seemingly connected. And it's like this underdog situation where we love these hidden people. We don't know who they are, and we want to know who they are. And there are creators possibly, or they're this or they're that. But what I'm finding is it's actually the same people that are keeping it all buried. And it's all
Interesting.
humans. And that can be jarring for people, because it sounds like I'm taking away every bit of mysticism that they have found or something. And I'm not, because I have had my own wild experiences with beyond space and time intelligence, or consciousness, or this everlasting feeling of love or God. I've had that feeling, that direct communication. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to take that away from anybody, but they are. And they know that when we come back from an ineffable transcendental experience or something, and we don't know what it was, where are we going to go to find out what to call everything, other than the history books or the mystical fairy books and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And I'm going to tie all that in, because
Yeah.
all of these things are human rooted societies, and they're all symbols that I don't even know how much is really deception around language itself. It's more that our perception of what words mean has evolved and
Oh,
changed, or been misled in a way.
have you ever read so he's a Tartar Fermenko. He was like the
Oh
Tartar.
yeah,
His that was
chronology.
one of you have you've seen some.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
but
read
like,
flamenco. Yeah, it's
oh,
intense.
nice. Yeah, and so, I mean, I only read like 3 or 4 of his, but that was one thing that blew my mind was how much names are easily changed over time. Like like all these, and I think his one and I don't know if this is true, but like the first Bible or the earliest Bible they have, it doesn't have any vowels in it. So they had
Mm,
to, put these words like it would be BLD, which could be blood, which could be so on and so on and so on. And again, I haven't like seen it, but he brought up another point of like Amsterdam, how the first sign looks like this. That's not Amsterdam. So how do we
mhm.
even know which location is which location? But so that's kind of what it
No,
sounds
you're
like.
spot on. That's happening all the time. I mean, and the confusion of languages, right? It's pretty amazing when you get into it, and when you start listening to etymologists and linguists, they talk about how everything does come from phonetics, and they even believe that like the earliest alphabets, like the actual symbols, like technically should represent what the action it's describing is. Like it looks like the action even. And when you look at the alphabet, in even the English alphabet, you can kind of you can see that in our language too. Like B is a very aggressive sound, the B, and
Yeah.
it's we're talking real primal stuff here. Like this is hard to kind of get your head around sometimes, because we're talking like prior to language. And that's what the Box Saga really roots itself in, is this root language that is the central part of it. So the Box Saga is an oral tradition. It's been passed down supposedly for generations, for thousands and thousands of years, through one single family. And this story is yeah, it's basically the story of the human race and everything. It goes back to this paradise time, and it gets into this ice time, this Atlantis time. But the coolest part, my favorite part about it is near the end of this Atlantis period, because then we start getting into like the biblical stuff and everything, because we start having,
so this is pre like, I don't know if you're but like pre-flood. This is like, what are they?
Yes.
Pre-Adamites.
This is this is pre-diluvian or antediluvian.
Yes. Okay.
This is, so that's the thing. That's it. I mean, not to get too sidetracked, but we have a whole popular hidden history thing going on. Joe Rogan's championing it, Randall Carlson, Graham Hancock, all them. But like, I'm sorry, they're gatekeepers, because they're stopping everything, and it's that we have no knowledge what was going on before this certain period of time. And I don't believe that's true. I really think that we can find what was happening, but we have to allow ourselves to look where the old anthropologists used to look, which was folklore and mythology. Because if you understand symbolism, which is still freaking ridiculously hard to do, and I am no expert either, but I learned, try to stand on the shoulders of giants. If you can understand symbolism, you start to understand that a lot of this is history. A lot of the folklore and mythology is history dressed up in costume for the most part.
Yeah. And then my last question, then continue on so the golden age, is this like that, the Saturn worship type of gold, like the golden age where, so is that what that
it might be? I think so. The thing is, with the Box Saga and the root language, everything gets flipped upside down and back around again, because we start looking at words like devil or demon in a much different context, when they claim that it's actually a phrase that means the moon. Demon or devil is the wheel, which is actually a swastika, a metal swastika spinning around, which represents the stars. The was it the Big Dipper going around so it gets into a lot of that. I mean, we talk about star people coming to different places and bringing agriculture and enlightening people and stuff like that. Well, to me, star people means people that actually understood the stars. The interesting part, they're called light beings, because they were light-skinned people intruding into a darker world. And this is controversial as hell, because we have a race war going on right now. Like, all bets are against this kind of shit. And in fact, like I said before we were recording, I was on YouTube kind of just like doing some more research, and I came across this awesome video. I'll send it to you, man. It's a total washing of everything I'm saying, just calling it all Nazism and calling it all racism and shit like that. And I think a lot of people are too smart to let that stop them. And I'm really happy to all those out there that are willing to keep going and not assume that like someone like me is just like trying to proclaim white people are better than everybody. Like, that's not even fucking close. I'm pretty sure they're all our enemies. So it's like, we're just talking about people covering their own tracks and glorifying themselves pretty much.
Well, so all right, so continue with so it's a global Atlantis. It's the land that's not in ice or in ice, Atlantis.
And so I'll explain it a little bit more. So this place that the story originates, and this place that is supposedly the center and the first place of mankind, which was also the North Pole, is actually where Helsinki, Finland is. And the weird part is, how the hell is that the North Pole? Well, at least in the story, they claim that the Earth was tilted perfectly on its or not on its axis, right? It was up and down. So I guess Helsinki was right at the north. There's a whole documentary I can send you where there's this amazing guy. He's passed away now, Jim Chesner, but he took you all over Finland and Helsinki and showed you all these monuments and showed you how it's related to the Box Saga and how they've changed it or hidden it. There's a lot of like, pagan remembrance statues over the grounds that he claims were something else entirely pagan, but something completely different and just like washed away. But he claims that you can go to this island, and he shows you in one of the documentaries that there's this place out on an island south of Helsinki where there's like a vortex into the earth. And this sounds like crazy sci-fi, man. It's so wild. It's like supposedly like some sort of inward swirling thing with where the water is, and there's a monument over it, like like some sort of Hellenic monument or something like that.
Interesting.
So just to distract or something like that. It's, there's a lot of that in this. But so to continue on with, like, after the ice departs, this Helsinki was not frozen, so they were able to stay there because of this warm weather from the Gulf Stream coming up, but everything else was frozen in the Northern Hemisphere pretty much.
Okay.
So, but you think about all those southern kingdoms that were still active and still alive, but supposedly thousands and thousands of years go by where these people are stuck in the ice or surrounded by ice walls. So they're stuck in Helsinki. They're just surviving. They're trying to have more and more sons and daughters, try to keep the species alive more than ever, while all these southern kingdoms are kind of drifting astray from all the old ways and, creating their own kingdoms and things like that. So then the story says that they finally were able to leave the ice. And when they started to leave, they started to eventually mingle with these southern tribes. And this screams the biblical story of after the flood, when these gods came down. And the same thing happens in Gilgamesh. Like, these stories are everywhere of the flood, and then the helpers come down and the helpers come through. And I don't know, maybe helpers is a little too nice. You know what I mean? Because we're talking powerful people. We're talking rugged culture, like tribal people. I mean, we know what the Phoenicians and Vikings eventually were like. They were just conquering everybody, showing up everywhere. But we have a lot of connections to the way this is expressed in other mythologies and other religions throughout the world. It's really interesting how this one ties into language. And when you follow the language, you start seeing a lot of other interesting connections all over Europe and everything.
I'm just like thinking of question, so do you think this could play a role? Because that I just like learned this recently, how essentially like the Vikings conquer, like the Vikings conquered the Normans, they became the North, like they conquered they were in Italy, everywhere. Do you think that like plays a role in this story at all?
It's weird. Like, I get a little confused about it because I think a lot of times we're talking about, moderately recent history when the Vikings were around and doing these things, yet the Box Saga tells a story about quote unquote Vikings that is way older. And it's very bizarre and very strange. I did give you that clip, and that is what this is about. Actually, it'd probably be a good time. We could play that now, and we can kind of start and stop it and talk about it. But it's from the late Jim Chesner. It's from one of his 3 amazing documentaries you can find on YouTube. They're all called Box Saga. One of them's Welcome to Hell, Welcome to Atlantis, and Welcome to Rajasthan. And we can get into that a little bit later, the Rajasthan part, because it's very interesting as well.
Perfect.
But
let me
this part's really interesting. I'll tell a little bit of it before he gets into it.
Okay.
So these, well, actually, no, he does tell this, so we can kind of start it and see where it goes from.
All right. So just make sure you can. Can you hear that? I'll turn it louder.
Can't. I'm not sure if it's on your end or mine.
And they went back to hell, back to where Helsinki is today, the new name for hell. And there they start to live, and they start to create one new article race of people, which spread out over Russia. So the Finnish people and the Russian people, they're exact same people.
And just tell me when you want to stop too, Andy.
Sure. Or you too. If you have a question with something he says, please.
Thank you.
Finnish language until 800 years ago. But something happened in the family. Sometimes when they were trying to make many, many children quickly, they had more than 12 sons. And these more than 12 sons could be ambassadors. They could be information people going out. But in this case, 2 of these brothers, the 13th and 14th son, they had no title in the family because it was only the 12 sons that had the title. So these 2 brothers, these 2 kings, they wanted to become kings. So they decided not to go back to Finland, not to go back to hell, to be part of this Astra system there. And one of these
So Helsinki is that the connection they're making?
I forgot to get into that part of it. Yeah, where it's kind of ironic that we have a contemporary saying when hell freezes over is something that would like never happen, and literally hell in this story is the place that wouldn't freeze. It's pretty wild.
Crazy.
We run into a lot of those little wordplay things too.
Interesting. All right, Harry.
Brothers was called Don, and one was called Sven, and they were two kings. They were the Vikings. And these two brothers, one, Sven, he goes to Uppsala, where Uppsala, Sweden is today. And there he makes his capital. And he starts one article race of person there. And from his seed, from the seed of Sven, comes the Norwegians, the Icelandic, the Greenland people, the Scottish people, and the Irish people. They come from the seed of this Swedish king.
And doesn't this remind you also of like the Knights Templar, or like I guess the Knights Templar, like the St. Clairs, these families? That's what I'm like immediately thinking.
Yes, and I haven't even really gotten. I'm trying to like establish myself in another area right now, but like that kind of stuff is like kind of next on my list. I'm tying a lot of interesting shit together from different time periods, and it keeps confirming the same damn thing, and I'm just like, holy God,
dude, this sounds like that was like I said, they conquered Europe pretty much,
right?
And and they had these secret maps, secret treasure in the New World, all that stuff. That sounds like just like this. But okay, here, sorry.
Absolutely, no, good.
Don, the other brother, the other of the two brothers, he goes down to Denmark. He makes the mark of Don, and mark means land, so the land of Don. And this Don, from his seed, comes two kings in Germany. I think their name is Gottrip and Brandenburg. And these first two seeds, is Brandenburg is where Berlin is, and this Gottrip, I think, is where the Lübeck is. I could be mistaken on this, but I put this in. But anyway, the king line of Germany or Saxon, they're coming from the Danish, from his seed. And from this German and from this Danish, from this source story, comes the Austrian, the Swiss, the Dutch, the Holland people, the Belgian people, the English people. So the English is a different race than the Scottish and the Irish.
Isn't that wild?
That's crazy, dude.
I have to say supposedly, it's not.
Yeah.
Some anthropologists out there might be like, bullshit. And, but then you got to look at that anthropologist real close. And what is he identifying with, and who are his heroes, and what is he listening to?
I mean, and
just a lot of it's bullshit.
The British, they hated the Welsh. They they removed their language, their culture, and Scottish too. I mean, they were, you would think they'd be, if they were the same, perfectly the same, they had so much battles for, hundreds of years.
I mean, and even Jim Chesner here is telling this story. Like, none of these people necessarily knew where they all came from. Like, Jim and a lot of other people, they used to call themselves Bockists. I think it's a little silly, but they all would research a lot of this stuff with Eeyore Bock, the man who revealed this story. We'll get into that a little bit too. But
okay.
So my friend Joke from Sweden, who I've spoken with on a lot of different shows, and we've talked a lot about this stuff. He tells me, like, you Americans have such a skewed version of history, especially when it comes to European and Scandinavian history. Yeah. And he's like, if you have more than one of these languages too, it really helps. They say in the Box Saga, if you know Finnish and you know Swedish, then you know root language. It's pretty wild. He says that they still speak root in southern Finland. They just don't even really know what it relates to.
They speak southern. They speak what?
The root language from this Box Saga, this phonetic language, which is very, very similar, in my opinion, to the Phoenician alphabet, and it connects right into that. Which is the roots of Latin. I mean, it goes further, but every time you ask even an AI chatbot, like, where does this word come from? They're always going to give you Latin. It's like, well, where does that come from? Oh, we don't know. That's all. Ever since World War II, we can't really.
So I never heard. So you think that Latin came from the Phoenician alphabet?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah.
Okay.
That's not even a thought. That's a fact.
That's a fact. Okay. All right. Here we go.
But where are we here?
England is coming from in the Dan line, all the way down to France. So all this Western Europe is coming out from the seed of the Dan. So these two Vikings, these first two kings, 9,032 years ago, they come off from this island and they start this two more white races. There's 3 white races of people. There's 10 tropical races. The oldest white race is the Finnish and the Russians. These are the original white people on the planet. The second and third white people is the Danish, and the Swedish. And this is his Gotland story. It's probably more to it, but anyway, this is where they came out from in Atlantis. Atlantis was not some kind of UFO story. Atlantis was not some kind of big silver palaces and stuff. It was a period of time, how people lived in nature in the middle of one ice age. And now we leave from the Gotland. This is, I would say, the when we came out from Atlantis. This is the end of the Atlantis story, because Atlantis was crushed over, not with flood. Atlantis was crushed over with glaciers. It was completely crushed 10,032 years ago.
Damn, dude.
I just wanted to include Jim's words because he says it so perfectly and he knows the story a lot better than I do. You know, he told it many, many, many times for a lot of years. So rest in peace, Jim Chesner. But yeah, it's, you know, I take it still with a grain of salt to a certain degree. There's a lot of it that's really controversial and really weird and still kind of in the mythological territory in some ways, you know, especially the Earth thing. We don't necessarily have any evidence that ever happened, but who knows? Maybe they're talking about some sort of pole shift situation, you know, their perspective could be a little warped from their, you know, subjective experience of it all. You know, that's how the story gets handed down, you know, but a lot of stories are like that. A lot of bedtime stories, a lot of nursery rhymes, a lot of folklore tales are all about, you know, fairies and pixies and elves and things like that. But I can tell you a whole different angle to all that shit, and we can connect it to ancient aliens and everything.
Well, so that because I remember one of your tweets, it was like, I think you talked about pixies. I'm pretty sure it was pixies, and it was. And you were like, and I can't remember, but do you just explain what are pixies or whatever?
So I'm sure you've heard of the Scottish Picts, P-I-C-T.
Only I think literally because of your tweet, dude. I'm gonna be honest.
Oh, cool. All right. So the Picts in Scotland, northern and eastern Scotland, you know, people that arrived there, not supposedly native to the land, but Picts came there, and this word Pict meaning painted or tattooed. And so when we look at the Druidics and like the Celts, all of it, it's all tattooed with this blue paint and everything.
Yes.
And so that's what we're talking about. The Picts, the Pict seed is interesting because pixies are related to these magical beings, right? They're just like little pixies and pixie dust, which is interesting. But in Cornwall, England, there was a sacred gentry of Druidic priests known as Picti. P-I-C-T, with, at least in English, it's P-I-C-T hyphen S-I-D-H-E. And this C part at the end kind of is quite literal because it means one who sees, one who can see. And, you know, we can kind of tell that just doesn't mean normal sight. We're talking about a shaman of types or a druid, you know? So once again, we're talking about something that seems very mystical and, hey, look over here. But it's actually a human story. Why it's being covered up, that's still my favorite question. What's going on here? What's the point of all of it, right? But so yeah, that's one of the words. But where this folklore comes from is this group called the Tuatha De Danann, or the tribe of Danu. And this Danu is actually not even a you know, an Irish goddess. She's actually like an Armenian goddess because that's where these people come from. So Tuatha De Danann means tribe of the goddess Danu, and they were a godlike mythological race from pre-Christian Gaelic Ireland. They come from the seed of Nemed, which is the son of Agnomon of Scythia, And if you're familiar with Scythia is where Khazaria is, right? That's the
No
same spot.
way.
This is the Middle East, basically. We're getting real close to the Near East, you know? So these are also the tribe of Dan. These are the same people that we're talking about when we're talking about this lost tribe of Dan. And we can see this name Dan all over the Middle East. It's very clear. And we're tracing that back to the Phoenicians as well.
Yeah.
The Sythians were also known at that time as Ashkuzai, Askuzai. So that's an interesting word.
That reminds me of Ashkenazi.
Sure does, doesn't it? So the Sythians were a nomadic people, and they immigrated into the Near East through the Caucasus Mountains. The Caucasus Mountains, beginning of the 8th century BC. They were said to be destroyed by the Medes, who expelled the remnants of them to the north under the name Ashkenaz. So I thought you'd like that.
Crazy, dude. And
Yeah.
Also, didn't he say the tribe of Dan was like Germany, right? In France, or no?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think Danube River, you know, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, they do reference that. If you look at Box Saga, and especially if you go to boxsaga.info, there is a wealth of video and audio on there collected from like the late 90s. And yes, the website's kind of hard to navigate a little bit here and there. There's a lot of old grainy footage taken from like VHS recordings and stuff from the late 80s.
Yeah.
But if you can sit there and deal with it and you want the real raw primary stuff, you know, that's where you're gonna get it. And it's like there's videos that are like 7 hours long in some cases. It's nuts, but they're just making all these crazy connections with their history, the history they understand a lot better over there than we do over here, for sure.
Right. All right. Sorry, and I keep interrupting, so I don't.
No, not at all.
I might have lost your spot there. So
no, it's good. It's totally
Okay.
fine. And honestly, the more questions, the better, because there's a lot of research that you do that everyone does in this wonderful alternative world we're living in. That, you know, when I looked at the Box Saga and these types of subjects, there's so many little ping that go off in my head because of all the words and where people are supposedly coming from. I'm like, well, wait a minute, you know, everything connects. We just have to kind of untangle this whole thing, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of roadblocks. But so we know the Phoenicians from like primary source anthropologists, they talk about the Phoenicians being the descendants of the Canaanites, right? It's pretty wild. I mean, from the Canaanites of the Bronze Age, you know, they're basically the seafaring Phoenicians. And so when we look at Cornwall, England again, where the Picts were and the Pictsy or Pixie, we have tin mining. That's where it started. It was started in Cornwall, England. And Britain even gets its name from the Phoenician term Britannic, meaning land of tin.
Dude,
which is wild. And I know there is
crazy.
Also, if anyone's listening out there that knows more Celtic Irish history, there is a connection to the goddess Brigid with Britain. I don't know how well that all lines up though, you know, but this is pretty obvious when it comes to the language.
Yeah.
And the Phoenicians traded directly with Cornwall, England. So it's all connected. It's pretty wild. And then when we start getting into this Tuatha De Danann, right? This group, they showed up to Ireland. This is just mythology, right? It's not real. Yeah. These Tuatha, they showed up on ships of light on the shores of Ireland. But we know that the very common tactic of Vikings and Phoenicians, they would literally burn their ships when they got to shore.
I didn't know that. I never heard that.
It's wild. So it's like, I mean, yeah, people can say, well, you're just kind of like making two drastic points and pull them together. But I don't, we find this a lot, the same symbolism where it's turning something absolutely grandiose when in reality it's very human. And there's a twist either being put on it intentionally and nefariously, or it's like kind of a game of telephone in a way where we've forgotten what these things have meant, or it's a little bit of both, you know, maybe a little bit of both. Yeah. But so this Tuatha De Danann, we can find them in Armenia and Scythia. They're called the Tuatha Anu. and they have the same customs. They look the same. They're all tall, white, blue, green eyes, blonde hair, red hair, very tall, very, broad statured, seafaring, and then we can find them again a little further into the Middle East called Anunnaki. Ooh. And so, wait, I thought they were aliens.
Yeah.
Well, Zachariah Sitchin told me so, therefore, and me too, for a long time, man. And I was like, oh my God, were we made by aliens?
Yes.
And it fits so perfectly. It really does. And especially for like the science-driven mind, the guy that doesn't get along with Christian religion, like the people that can't get into that at all. This fits a lot. If the world's still mysterious, it's still weird, they're still hiding stuff, but it's aliens.
Right.
All my childhood dreams have come true. All right. All the sci-fi movies that the military helped pay for. All right. It's all too convenient for me, And of course, now we have disclosure coming, which is bullshit, and it will never come in the way that anybody thinks it will. But if it does, I don't know. As a good friend of mine always told me, if the mothership lands, don't get on.
That's a great tip, dude. So the Anunnaki they're the same group that broke once the ice broke. They're the people that were trapped in the ice, right?
Well, so we're talking so many hypothetical thousands and thousands of years of separation, but we are talking about people coming from the great dark north, or the great northern darkness, as many historians used to put it. The north was the great beyond, and so it is interesting. We have this inversion, right? We have Western religion that talks about a hell beneath us that is burning hot.
Yes.
And then we have it is an inversion of some way, is one the right way? Is one the wrong? Is one false, one true? Could be a dialectic. There's a lot there. There's a lot to digest. And I'm not saying we have any real answers here, but we have a lot to think about with a lot of this stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Let's see. What else could we talk about? I did a lot of etymology here, just to poop on more people and make them feel worse, and just bring them down and make them feel bad like I do, because this broke my heart in a lot of ways too. So there's perfectly good explanations for words like giant, dragon, elven, fairy, sky people. Like all these things are pretty explainable. When you look into the etymology of giant and you go all the way back to the Phoenician alphabet and things like that, this is a phonetic term meaning earthborn. Which I don't know what that means. I don't know if they're talking about humans or monkeys or trees or giant humans. I don't know, but they're not specifying anything to do with giganticness until they start talking about it in Greek when it comes to the planets and things like that, luminaries.
Do you know who Kenemi is? Have you ever heard of him?
No.
He's more like more religious kind of stuff, but he talks about giants. So he's anti, and he goes into kind of like this, where the word giant comes from it in the Bible and stuff. This doesn't mean that, Goliath was this huge, or all these things. I did he had a debate with a guy, Gary
Wayne.
They debated on my show about giants, but
oh wow, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that, dude. You're gonna have to point me in that direction.
It got a little. I'm not a big confrontation guy. It got a little heated at some point.
I can imagine.
But yeah, so that's kind of similar to what you're saying. But yeah,
right. It's once again we have this look over here. Look at this mythical thing, and of course, if you grow up in a world that is popularly mundane, right? The worldview is everything's mundane. There is no magic. That's just for sillies, or it happened a long time ago, something like that. With religion, maybe, but not anymore. So if you grow up in that world and something doesn't feel right, and you start looking into some of this stuff, or you have a interesting experience like I did, and you start looking into all these things, there's a good chance that you're going to stop at, they're hiding all this amazing mystical stuff from us. And that's the end. And I completely understand that. I mean, why would you keep going unless you're some psychopath that can't take no for an answer or something, you know?
Right.
Like me, like I couldn't stop. And I'm like, well, but wait. We don't have any proof of that. And then now, you know, I'm sure I can argue with people all day long that will say, you know, you can't trust the etymology either. But I think there's an absolute reason why you can trust the etymology. I think there's a reason why this is all here. I don't think the elites or the cabal or whatever we want to call them, I don't think they lie to us. I don't think they lie at all. I think they tell us the truth. I just don't think we understand it. And I know that's not an uncommon saying in this alternative world. You know, they use symbolism, they're messaging each other, or they're shoving it in our faces. But even to this extent, we have no idea that most of the time we're not talking about mystical, magical beings. Same with dragon, which is a real rough one, but that originally means one with the sight. And eventually it becomes one with the deadly sight, you know? And yeah, that sounds negative and evil, right? But one with the deadly sight. Well, when you talk about shamans, they're like the ones that know about the other side, the ones with the deadly sight, the death sight. They understand the other side. It's all in how we're phrasing things. It's all in how we're interpreting them. And it's interesting how, depending on the interpretation, we can go down entirely different paths. And that's just what I want to be careful of. I'm not saying this is foolproof. You know, people, please tear it apart if we can. But, you know, we got to have some source material to back it up, because if not, we're just kind of planting our flags all over the place willy-nilly. Like Atlantis was this, and we should look for this one city, and it had blue aliens, and
right.
You know, and they could, you know, they built things with their minds and stuff. Maybe I don't know.
So after, and I'm just using Anunnaki because I'm gonna butcher whatever word you used before. So what's like the next step on this story, I guess?
Okay, well, so we can go two different ways. So real quick, all right. So just to give you more about the Box Saga, the supposedly in 1050 AD, Pope Leo whichever one was Pope in 1050. I want to say ninth. I want to say Leo the Ninth supposedly hired a papal army in Middle Europe and sent them to what was called Udenma, or Hell, which is another name for hell, this Helsinki, and killed the remaining Aesir and Vanir people of this Box Saga. Killed them all and destroyed everybody, leaving no trace of this original story of humanity, except for these two remaining families, the Bockstroms and the Rostroms. And they made a deal with the Pope that this information would stay hidden and would only remain in their families and not come out to the public for 1,000 years. So it would, so they would be able to do whatever they wanted until then, you know?
Right.
I don't know. Probably until the words were until the world was ready, which is interesting considering what have we had going on in the hippie community and all up until now with Terence McKenna leading the way through the archaic revival. What is the archaic revival other than a revival of a time period from long ago? And we see how much paganism and these alternative ideas on spirituality, and of course the hijacking with the new age shit, has come through and has become so popular in the 20th century. And not to say, I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, I've done plenty of psychedelics, and I think there's a lot of important wisdom to be gained in a lot of areas that are supposedly taboo. But I also think there's a reason they're taboo beyond just authoritarian fear. I think there's a reason to distrust all of authority, all of it, you know, the church, the pagans, all of them, because they're all tied back to, it seems, a hidden group of people that are burying their own history and calling themselves gods and ancient aliens.
Yeah.
Or pixies or elves, because elven, if you trace that etymology, it also just literally goes back to a Proto-Germanic term meaning white. So what do we do with this? Fairies, fair-skinned people, just like Game of Thrones, right? The fair folk are on the outskirts. They're beyond the wall. They're in the ice. They're in the snow.
That's
And they're all
interesting.
redheads and blonde and everything. It's pretty wild, and I don't understand it entirely, but it seems to be everywhere because we can go to India, and the origins of Iran is the Aryans.
Yeah, could you because I just read that could you explain that Aryan?
I'm getting into that too. I don't know too much about that part, but that's why I wanted to also share that with you, that Jim Chesner also has a Box Saga documentary called Welcome to Rajasthan, and it's talking about these lineages and these groups of migrating peoples coming into the Middle East and India and Iran and all these different places. And what's interesting is you don't necessarily need the Box Saga to find out about that. You can look up the guy that you and I kind of bonded over talking about, Robert Sepper's work.
Yeah.
Another guy that's completely bashed. You type his name into YouTube and it's just worst anthropologist ever, Nazi, white supremacist. He is none of those things. If you listen to like a lot of his research and information, he's showing us anthropological data of 6,500-year-old mummies in China with Caucasoid DNA.
Yeah,
they're everywhere. So it's not necessarily some like these guys were better. It's nothing like that. It's what was going on and why is it being hidden, and why is an opposite like racial takeover happening right now, supposedly. But it's all weird how the pieces fit together. And I'm very curious to see what you might do with this over time, Jack, because I know that you do a lot of interesting information research into the last couple centuries. I've seen you do it. So it's like, I think this all ties together in a way that we can all pick apart.
Yeah, no, I can't. Yeah, dude, I'm definitely going to look more in because I don't know. Have you ever heard of, I mean, if you read Fomenko, how timelines are distorted and all these things like that, do you think that this story plays a role in that?
I think it might. I think it absolutely could. I still think we have too many missing puzzle pieces, and I don't like to guess, but I will guess just for the fun of it and say that, yeah, we could easily have some sort of thing where like the Box Saga claims to take place, like this paradise time was like 10 million years ago. That was the end of it. That's like, when Box Saga, when this Atlantis period started or something, where they were stuck in the ice. So that time period is pretty insane, but I don't know how insane that is because I'm not a super studied academic geologist or archaeologist. And unfortunately, even most of them that you can contact and talk to would also disagree with us on like everything we say about history because they're so indoctrinated and bought and paid for their whole lives. So it's really a difficult topic to get into and find the facts. And I think there's just a little bit of gut instinct that has to take place.
I love it.
And that's an interesting point I'm glad I said it, because gut instinct is actually connected to the Box Saga because they claim that the word God was pronounced gut. And when they say gods, they're actually talking about those who were in touch with the brain or the heart in the gut. And what is that always connected to, right? That's connected to will and intention.
Yeah.
So we can connect those principles right there to like all the mysticism and every principle in the esoteric languages we know. So a lot of times we're talking about words that have been glorified. And again, I'm not trying to take away anybody's amazing personal experience with this experience we call life, because I've had those too. I've talked to what I'm comfortable with calling God. And I think people out there have learned ways to use that experience against us in a lot of ways.
No, dude, you've created your own opinion, dude. No one can trash that. That's, people disagree, but
oh, absolutely. And that's why I would like to finish with that, because I'm not some atheist doing this like that. Your religion's all bullshit, because they're all full of shit.
So one we can like finish with this question, but so the one guy, Scale, in the chat, he wanted your thoughts on the red-haired giants and the RH negative blood factor.
Okay, so I don't know too much about the RH stuff. I've heard about it and I'm looking more at it, and I'm sure it'll probably add up to a lot of this stuff. But the red-haired giants, man, it's cool to look into that history, because as recently as stories from Afghanistan, right?
Which
is weird. And I think when we look at the anthropology, it's pretty clear because like we're finding red-haired people, mummies in Egypt from every dynasty.
Yes.
Doesn't matter which one, with
Yes.
blue eyes. The giant thing, yeah. I don't know because I'm not saying that people couldn't have been a little bit bigger. You know, we found legit big, huge skeletons like 8-9 feet tall. I'm not
Right.
discrediting that. When people start getting into 12 and 15 and 20 and stuff like that, and then it starts getting more and more mythological, that's when I'm not saying it's definitely not true, but I get worried that we're stepping into those those same exact, you know, wild traps that, you know, exaggeration that's happened to us. Real quick, I can kind of reference someone to look into. I think his name was Robert McDonald, but look up a book called Fantastes or Fantastes, Phantastes. This is the first book in Western academia, Western culture. It's from the mid 1800s. He was a predecessor or like a, what is it? Like, you know, the guy that wrote Alice in Wonderland, he was like a protege of this guy.
Okay.
What's his name? I can't remember that guy's name, but
yeah.
these folklorists, these fanciful writers from the 1800s, this book Fantastes is the first time the word portal is used in a fictional way to describe a transportation to a magical world. Before that, this word has just always been used, even when found in folklore describing these fairies and stuff. It's used. We're talking about the sea people, man. These are portholes, and these are doorways and entrances from docks to the land and stuff like that. So it's pretty wild. We can just, and I feel like, you know, people get depressed sometimes when they learn a lot of this stuff. But again, it doesn't have to take away from the shit inside, you know.
No.
But another cool point is there's a cool show on Netflix called Ragnarok. And it's just a cheesy, like kind of teen angsty action show about the gods and stuff like that. It's like the Viking gods are in human form and they have to battle these ancient giants. And the giants, they're not huge or anything. The reason why they're giants is because they were the ones with the boot on everybody's skull. And they were the ones that were in charge of everything and keeping everybody else down. And they thought themselves bitter and, you know, better and more powerful and better looking and this and that. That's this giant. And that's, you know, we do that a lot in symbolism. You know, we think Anunnaki were a bunch of reptilians, right? But no, that the snake symbolism, like the people with the snake heads, these were those, you know, in Ireland, they were called druids, but in the Middle East, they were the people that could see. They were these shaman type. They were the medicine man. They were the ones dealing with death and
I like
the cosmos
that, dude.
and stuff like that.
All right, I'm sorry. My real last question. So
Dude,
right now,
it's good. I'm good, man. Bring them on.
So obviously, like there's a powerful group that controls some entity is guiding our culture, our world a certain way. So what ties in the Box Saga with like current time? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, sure. To go back a little bit with the archaic revival, I think there's something going on with that. You know, I think there's a natural way to live, but I think going back too far in time, we would be completely displaced, and we're not going to accept a lot of these old pagan ways and stuff that are sneaking their way back into the modern world. Box Saga relating to the world now, I think for the most part, it's because we're orphans right now and we don't know where we came from. And not to say that the Box Saga is the absolute answer that everyone's going to accept or can accept, but I think it's a key. It's a good keystone, especially the root language. If anybody's willing to put in some time and really look at what they're suggesting about the alphabet, to them was called Alpharness Bet, which is the rhyme of the Allfather. It's really cool, man. I mean, there's just so much to it. And the claim that Eeyore Bock is just some crazy man that just made it all up. Well, he'd have to be a real savant. And yeah, that can exist out there. But the problem is when you have people coming from all different parts of the world to study it and are coming away mesmerized, like mathematicians that learn about the root language and then just give up everything in their life and move into a yurt and draw the flower of life for the rest of their life based on the root language, like some sort of mathematics they found inside of it. Like there's something to it, man. And it's definitely connected to, and we could talk more. There's so many other subtopics about the Box Saga that relate. What was that?
No, I said,
you bet. We could talk about freaking all the giant dicks that are erected all over the planet and why those aren't Egyptian or Mesopotamian or anything like that.
What do you think
it goes
are?
All the way back to the Box Saga, man, because before we had blood rituals, we had semen rituals, because the seed was the transmutation from the sun. We're talking about the first sun worship too. This is all so we are talking about at least what we talk about now in conspiracy circles as like this ultimate evil, the sun worshipers and everything. But again, there's just a lot more to it here. And I'm not saying good or evil. We all come from one big family, it seems, and we have one big family feud going. And I don't think anyone knows who's who anymore, really,
It's true, dude. Well, dude, I gotta like check out I'm gonna look up at that website and all, but where like on your show, is that is this like, where can they find you? Is this like the main, your major topic you focus on, all that stuff?
I always feel bad because I wish it was, but I don't do this often. I love this stuff, but I don't have a lot of the answers. I'm just trying to put a lot of this together. I do have a sideshow that I haven't done in a very long time just because of time constraints with two other people, one in California across the country and my friend who I mentioned in Sweden. It's just very difficult to schedule those. That was called Roots of Creation. And that is a certain playlist on my YouTube channel. If you go to the Deep Share podcast, you'll find the Roots of Creation episodes we did. And we did speak to Eeyore, Bock's longest friend, Michelle Merle, who is basically the storyteller at this point. He knows all the information, and it's pretty amazing. He's the one that's still leading the dig, which actually we didn't even get into the archaeological dig. We can if you want. I have time. I don't know if you guys
talk. We'll finish with that. Talk.
All right, because that is very contemporary. It's the closest thing we kind of have to an actual physical find, right? So this place is called the Lemonkinen Temple, and you'll butcher the word if you type it in, I'm sure, but you'll find it. The Lemonkinen Temple is in Finland. It's this big rock formation that, of course, the Finnish Historical Society has deemed since the 90s was just a natural rock formation, and there's nothing to it. Look away. Of course. But since they've started digging and years have gone by, and they've made some progress. They've gotten inside the first chamber and they've found checkerboard patterns carved into the wall. So I don't take that as a friggin' coincidence whatsoever, especially with all of this. And because my friend Yake's explained to me in details I can't express verbally well here, that this all connects to the Templars and everything, and a lot of the Swedish kings that we can name in history. It's pretty wild. But so this Lemonkinen Temple is this place that all these people from all around the world have gotten together and helped this independent dig to get through these barriers that Eeyore, before he died, told them that they would find. Like, you're going to run into this many limestone rocks, and then there's going to be 3 big rocks under he set it all up. He drew it all out. And so far they have found that.
Damn, dude.
Yeah, man. They haven't necessarily found anything crazy yet. It's supposedly the oldest temple in all of the world. And it spirals down into the earth, like, who knows how many levels or something like that. And at every level,
dude,
there's a hall of golden statues representing generations of these Aesir gods or Aesir people. It's really crazy. And even they claim that the idea of pilgrimage, returning to the homeland, is like from this. And of course that, everybody can claim that. I don't think they can take that necessarily, but they would have people from all over these other ringlands from all over the world go back to this North Pole, this polar ringland that was the All-Father's land, the Aesir, the beginning, and bring them gold that was found across the crust of the earth and everything. So the story is absolutely magnificent. It may or may not be true, but there's unavoidably a lot of it that fits too well with other narratives that are coincidentally hidden or persuaded. People are persuaded not to look at because they might get called Nazis or something.
Well, Andy, where can people listen to you and find you, dude? Because this is like I have to like decompress and digest
Thanks,
this
man.
information. But yeah, where can
I'm glad
people
you dug
find
it, man.
listen to you more and all that stuff?
So you can find me on any podcast app at the Deep Share Podcast. On social media, just at the Deep Share, and I'm sure you can ask Jack. He'll agree that you can find me just ranting and arguing with people. I'm not as hippie laid back McConaughey on Twitter. I'm much more aggressive, just like retweeting UFO people and yelling at them. But I try to be nice. I'm just trying to pass on some hard questions and information. But I'm on there, and you can find me on YouTube and Odyssey. I'm up on there now too. So
nice.
this has been awesome, man. And
dude, we'll have to do it again after I look over more, and I'll be better.
Oh, sure.
Ask some questions and stuff.
I think after that time, I'd love to have you on the Deep Share sometime as well. We've talked about this for months anyway. We got to do more of this stuff. So I think I would love to hear all about your research directly from you, and with my weird questioning attached to it. So I think it would be a good time there too.
Well, Andy, thanks so much for doing the show. Seriously, this was like crazy. I gotta, like I said, digest this, and then everybody else, I'm finishing up Confessions of a DC Madam. So I think I'll do that Wednesday or Thursday. So I'll see you guys then. So I'm Jack Allen. This is Andy from the Deep Share. I'll post his links. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Peace.